President Cyril Ramaphosa is visiting the port of Ngqura in Gqeberha today, where he will receive a briefing on current projects and operational performance. Tomorrow, he is scheduled to meet mayors and provincial executives to discuss coordination between national and provincial government structures. He's in the Eastern Cape for a two-day oversight visit to look at ways to improve service delivery. I'm now joined by Dr. Harlan Kluter, a research fellow at the University of the Free State. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. The last time President Ramaphosa did a similar visit was here in Gauteng, where he was appalled at what was going on in the city of Johannesburg in particular. Mind you, he does live in Gauteng, Johannesburg as well, the president that is. And since then, there's been very little, if any, progress with regard to the issues that he actually raised, which then begs the question, do these Izimbizos actually work?
I think, good afternoon, Vuyo, good afternoon to the viewers. I think you're right. I think South Africans were appalled by the fact that the president was appalled, given that he stays in Johannesburg. And so what is pretty obvious, is that we've got an almost governance collapse, is that it looks like, and it would appear that these ceremonies, these oversight visits, is nothing other than a public relations exercise or PR exercise that I think is almost part of the build-up to the 2026 elections. And so the effectiveness, as you rightly pointed out now, he visited Gauteng, he was appalled, but nothing has changed. Now, we do have the institutional governance structures in terms of oversight, but it would appear from the evidence that even that has come to naught. And so there's a worrying pattern in all of this that I think must be addressed.
That hospital where our colleague Sipa Kema was speaking, was standing in front of, speaking to the MEC of Health, has had problems. I mean, we can count numerous problems they've had just over the past few months, from security officers who went on strike, health workers who also went on strike, the chaos inside that hospital, debt, and of course, all of that coming on the back of a big burden of disease, but also, ill health affecting so many of those residents. And it is, struggling to actually cope with the people it has to service. And then you wonder really whether we actually need these types of visits, or rather, the president should actually be cracking the whip.
No, exactly. I think there's a critical lack of will. There are two things for any institution. Aristotle says politics is the art of the possible. There's clearly a lack of will. There's clearly a lack of vision, of a single voice saying we are going into this direction. I think the last time we saw some serious action from the president was his family meetings during COVID, where he says, this is what is going to happen. This is how South Africans behave, etc. And what is very obvious is that there's a lack of political will, and then there's a lack of ethical and accountable leadership, because some of the conduct of our state officials tantamounts to me to treason. We've completed research after research where we point out, here's the evidence, and then it does not get acted upon. And so until we show some will, some leadership, some decisive leadership, we'll be having these conversations over and over. So and I don't want to be harshly critical, but in my view, it's nothing but a public relations exercise as we build up to 2026, and who can be surrounded by the president, photo ops, etc., and nothing really changes. We've got structural problems in our society, and that, conversation starts at local government that is in a complete mess. If you looked at oversight visit by the Parliamentary Oversight Committee the other day on the findings in Buffalo City, it left one stunned at the deterioration. And so unless we turn this around with political will and decisive leadership, nothing, I'm afraid, is going to change, because it is so obvious that we've got a problem when it comes to local governance.
Well, speaking of local government, I remember the last time we were there at a funeral of a local activist. The mayor then launched days later, launched a campaign where they're calling for sort of stricter or harsher treatment of prisoners who have been incarcerated for murders and the like. But what was interesting for me, speaking to a colleague there, was how the mayor was busy collecting signatures, which he said he was going to forward to the president, who was due to arrive in the city a couple of weeks later. Surely something has to be said about how government, because part of this exercise, we're told, is to ensure that there is coordination between the three spheres of government. But if the mayor can't pick up a phone when she has a pressing problem and actually deal with it there and then, but rather has to collect signatures to be presented when the president arrives in the city, surely something is amiss there.
No, exactly what you're saying. You know, we've got the district development model that was proposed by government about 4 years ago that sets the institutional framework. On top of that, we've got the ILGR, Intergovernmental Relations Framework. We've got the frameworks. We've got the MINMEX, where we sit with the national minister, sits with MECs. So we do have the governance framework. I think it's when people leave that room, it's at the implementation phase where we fail all the time. Colleague Justice Malala talks about, we don't have a policy, we've got an implementation problem. And so unless we've got a framework and through which we implement, you will notice, Vuyo, in a couple of months, 2 months from now, the Auditor General will release her report on the state of local government finance. And the same, we will hear the same story. People listen, but they hear, but they're not listening. There's no action. So unless action follows what we know is wrong, but I think a lot of our institutions are stuck in knowing what to, but don't know how. They know the problem, but we can't seem to get out of this governance mess. And that, like I said in the beginning, we get out of this governance crisis through decisive, ethical, and accountable leadership. It's as simple as that. And the second thing is for communities to realize and take back their power. We've got a system of democracy called representative democracy, where we elect the presidents, but we've got participatory democracy. And communities have almost lost agency. So unless communities take back their power, unless the middle class, the black middle class in this country, wake up and get their hands dirty, and unless the academic community become more activist in their outlook, very little is going to change. We're going to keep saying government is wrong, but we seem to be stuck in this neutral and not being able to take this thing forward.
Of course, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. There are, one of the success stories of the past 30 years has been the establishment of the Guga in Gqeberha, which is where the president was going to go initially, the Guga SEZ, but however, he was then, today's proceedings were then moved to the port. Now, both those projects are working fairly well. Guga, as I say, has been one of the success stories. The port of Guga is one of the fastest growing on the continent.
So I agree with you, and we started a podcast about 3 years ago called Great Governance ZA, where we collected stories of officials that are excellent in local government and in governance as a whole. So there are committed officials out there. I think we need to learn from what is it that they are doing, and I bet you if we go in there, we'll find institutional leadership, not factionalism. There is no conflict between the board and the CEO, for example. There's a vision, there's checks and balances, there is monitoring and evaluation, there's a system behind success. So every success, there's a system behind it, and we need to go and replicate that. And unfortunately, we've got a lot of talk in this country, but so little action. It's, you know, and the president himself have been guilty about that. I mean, he's being appalled by the state of Johannesburg as just almost an indication of he's the president, they're not in touch with reality on the ground. And so this conversation starts locally. Mayors need to be held accountable. Ward councillors must be accountable. We need to ensure that communities take back their power. We are now in the season which is called IDP, where all municipalities in this country are involved with public participation, and people need to participate, but people are also tired of participating because they keep saying the same thing over and over to municipalities, but they're not listening. And so we almost have a system of wicked compliance in municipalities where we consult with communities, but just for compliance, with no intent to really responding to their cry.
Dr. Harlan Fluter, let me thank you very much for your time and insights. He's a research fellow at the University of the Free State.